Hey, how's it going? Today we are talking coast to coast with Stephanie Vukovich. This is Running to the Castle, a podcast for injury-prone Run Disney runners on a journey to running magical miles. Join me, Dr. Allie, as I share the secrets I've gathered as a runner, doctor of physical therapy, and coach. You'll learn the exact ways I get my clients to the castle strong without feeling broken or held together with KT tape as they cross the finish line. Hi, Stephanie. How's it going?
Hi, it's great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this because so many people have so many questions about coast to coast. You see it in the Facebook groups. People DM me. It's pretty much everywhere. And it seems like it has changed from what it used to be to what it was last year to what or this year, I guess, 2024, and what it's going to be next year. So I know you did coast to coast this year and have done it in the past. So thank you so much for being able to answer the questions that amass.
Sure. I know that when I first did Coast to Coast, I did have the same questions. And now that I've done it a couple times, I'm happy to share some of that knowledge with others.
That's perfect. Thank you. So for those of us who don't know you very well, do you mind telling us a little about you, how you got into Run Disney and Coast to Coast?
So I'm Stephanie. I've been running at Run Disney since 2016. I was not a runner before that. My husband went on this weight loss journey and lost an incredible amount of weight. And one of the ways that he wanted to celebrate that was going to Disneyland to run the Star Wars half marathon there. And he asked if I would go and run it with him. And I laughed because surely he was not serious because I was not a runner. But people assured me, like, sure, you can run a half marathon, no problem. You just have to train for it. So I started with Couch to 5K and worked my way through it, and we registered for Disneyland. But in the meantime, they had introduced the Star Wars races in Florida, and that they would be eligible for not only coast to coast medal, but a special one. So naturally, if we were going to do it, we were going to go all in and do both races.
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you weren't a runner because don't you coach runners cross country maybe now? Did I see that?
I do. I coach high school cross country now. So, go all in on all of it.
Yeah, you went from a non-runner to now being a coach, which is so cool.
Yeah.
That's great. So you said starting in 2016. So how many coast to coast years, I guess, is the way you say it, have you completed?
So I've done 2 coast to coast years. But it's important to know that Disneyland had a long hiatus from their Run Disney races. So there were a number of years where coast to coast was not available. Last year was its first year back. So I think that's why people have questions about it, because there are many new people to Run Disney who didn't get to experience coast to coast before.
Interesting. So was the stopping of the Disneyland races, was that COVID related or was that pre-COVID?
It was pre-COVID. Nobody's really sure if it was dwindling numbers, if it was related to the city of Anaheim not giving them the permits they needed, because a large portion of the races are run through the city at Disneyland, just given the size, or if it was due to construction. Nobody really knows the real reason, but they did go on hiatus for quite a few years.
Interesting, because I know my sister, I got into Run Disney because of my sister, and I went and saw her do the Avengers race in Disneyland, and I know she was really bummed that they had stopped it, and I didn't realize that they had just stopped all of them. I thought they had just stopped that one at that time, and then it was COVID related for the rest. So that's new information to me. That's interesting. So, since we've been mentioning the word coast to coast, for our newer Run Disney runners, can you tell us what that means? You touched on it a little bit, but maybe a little bit more.
Sure. So Run Disney defines coast to coast as running a race at Disneyland Resort in California and then another one at Walt Disney World in Florida. So if you are able to accomplish that, then they reward you with a special medal.
And does it matter like when you do those races or which races you choose? Are there stipulations on that?
There are, yeah. So to be eligible for Coast to Coast, you need to complete a 10-mile distance or above. So the 10 miler that happens at Springtime Surprise would be eligible. Any of the half marathons, and then the marathon, of course, is eligible as well. And you need to complete both of those races, one at Disneyland and one at Disney World, within the same calendar year.
Okay, so calendar year, not Run Disney season, because the Run Disney
Correct.
season that starts in now September since Disneyland has come back
Yes.
and goes through Springtime Surprise. So if somebody did this past Disneyland Halloween, the first one in 2024, but they did Fairy Tale Princess Challenge 2025, that one doesn't count, right?
Correct. That would not be Coast to Coast eligible. And it is a little funky how Run Disney kind of starts their season mid-year. They consider it kicking off with their virtual series in the summer, but for the in-person runners, Disneyland Halloween weekend is the first in-person race. And it kind of stretches across 2 calendar years, but Coast to Coast is just strictly January through December.
That's interesting. Yeah, I always forget about the summer virtual series. I don't know why, because the medals are so cute, but
They
in my
are.
mind that's the end of the season, but you're right. It actually is the beginning of the season. Okay, so we mentioned so it has to be at least the 10 miler, and we know 10 milers at Springtime Surprise. All of the other weekends, whether it's at Disneyland or Disney World, those have at least that half marathon. And then we know marathon weekend is the only marathon, but those
Yes.
distances, those would qualify.
Yes. So anything below a 10 miler would not count. So you wouldn't be able to run a 10K at one park and then do a half marathon at another, even though you're on both coasts. Those wouldn't make you Coast to Coast eligible.
Okay. And so which races did you do for this most recent Coast to Coast?
For this most recent Coast to Coast, my husband went with me. We started out with the half marathon at Walt Disney World Marathon Weekend. And then we went the following weekend to Disneyland to complete the Dumbo Double Dare Challenge. So we did the half
Wow.
marathon there.
And so not only did you do Coast to Coast, you did Coast to Coast within a week of each other.
We did. I feel like we were pretty conservative because there were people who were doing Dopey and then going and doing Dumbo. To me, that's an insane amount of running in 2 weeks.
It's so much running in 2 weeks. And so, sorry, you said you did the half marathon at Marathon Weekend.
Yes.
So that one, I did that one as well. That was the half of a half. So it's still
Yes.
counted, right?
It still counted because you completed the race that Disney laid out for you. Had the
Okay.
weather not impacted it, it would have been a half marathon. But because it was shortened, it was still recognized
Okay.
as a completion of that distance.
Okay. And you guys got a special medal, right? Because 2024, there were two tracks that you could do for Coast to Coast, right?
Yeah. So that one kind of threw people for a loop when it was first announced, because not only was it the first time Coast to Coast was coming back, but they announced there were going to be two different medals and there were two different ways to get them. And the one that we earned, you had to do the marathon weekend distance of some sort and then an additional Disneyland race. So we got the suitcase that's got the
Nice.
little spinners on it. So one castle is for Florida, one is for Disneyland, and then on the
Perfect.
back it showed the partner statue.
Oh, that's great.
Um, and then the other medal they offered last year was similar in style to that, but it was round, and I don't know if it had any spinners or anything special on it. We didn't get
Okay.
that one.
Okay. Okay. But do you know, would you have been able to get that one if you did more races? like, could you have gotten both coast to coast if you had all of the eligible races?
You could have. So they had two races at Disneyland last year, which would have made people eligible to get both. So if you completed the marathon weekend, and then let's say you did Dumbo and you earned that medal, that would have been your first one. Then you could have done another race like Princess or Springtime Surprise or Wine and Dine for your Disney World, and then have done the Halloween races at Disneyland and gotten the second medal.
Okay. Would you have, you might not know the answer to this, so forgive me. It's okay if you don't know. What if you had done like you did? So you do the half
Mhm.
marathon at marathon weekend, then you do the half marathon at Disneyland in January, and then you did wine and dine half marathon. Would three races make you eligible for that second coast to coast, or would you have had to do the Halloween Disneyland?
You would have had to do the Halloween Disneyland. You can't use one race to double dip for two medals.
Okay. Okay. And it sounds like that might be a moot point moving forward because they went back to
Yeah,
one medal.
I think it will probably be just one medal, and I believe the wording makes it so that you can only earn it once. So even if you do all the races, you're only coming away with it for one medal next year.
Oh, okay. That makes sense
Yeah.
to have that happen. Okay. And it sounds like that's how it was previous years. Maybe when you did your first coast to coast, they had the one medal. Am I remembering that correctly?
There was one medal, mostly. They did have a special medal that was similar for a different race series, but this was the coast to coast medal that was
Oh.
offered in the past. Um, and then the lanyard was just kind of blue. The lanyard varied from year to year, but the basic medal did not. Um, and that was just the standard coast to coast medal. So you could get that for Avengers weekend, or they had Tinkerbell, they had Dumbo Double Dare. So they had a number of races at Disneyland. However, there was a version of that medal that was pink, and I don't own it, but you got that medal for completing Princess and then Tinkerbell at Disneyland. So the special pink
Oh.
version was pretty neat. But
Okay.
then there was a special medal for the Star Wars races, where if you did both, the coast to coast medal was the Castle Run. And when this first started, because we did the first year, there was a lot of debate if the Castle Run would replace the coast to coast medal or if you would get both. And we were pleasantly surprised that, yes, we did get both medals. That was pretty fun.
Very interesting. So when was the last time that those Star Wars races were offered? I know that's not technically coast to coast, but I'm very curious
Yeah.
because people love the Star Wars stuff.
Um, they were originally, when they were offering them on both coasts, it was originally Light Side and Dark Side Challenge. So Light Side was California, Dark Side was Florida. And then when they stopped doing the Disneyland races, they kept Star Wars Weekend at uh, Disney World, but renamed it. I think the Castle Run Challenge was only offered maybe 3 years, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Oh, okay. So is the you said that they renamed the Star Wars one. What is it now?
They've since discontinued it,
Okay.
and it's, of course, slipping my mind
That's okay. That's okay. No problem.
since it's been discontinued, but
Yeah. It sounds like there have just been a lot of Run Disney changes through the years, and
yeah,
a big part of that was the COVID time frame,
yeah, for
reorganizing
sure.
things.
And I think that the Star Wars race was kind of a niche population that it appealed to. It didn't quite have as much draw. But I also think that post COVID, when people were returning to races, you saw the return of people who had run Disney before, but then a whole new population was discovering it. And it just took off.
Yeah. And, I wasn't planning to ask this, but since you kind of just mentioned it, hasn't it gotten a lot, like Run Disney in general, gotten a lot more popular since
Oh yeah.
COVID? Like pre-COVID, I heard that registrations were pretty much a breeze, and now it's get on there on time or miss out.
Yeah, depending on the weekends, it was still competitive. It just, I don't think it was quite as competitive as it is now. Pre-COVID, Dopey sometimes didn't sell out at all, and now it's gone. So
Absolutely, yeah. So when you're registering for these races, speaking of registration, is there anything special you need to do while you're registering? Like, do you have to know in advance that you're going to go for coast to coast?
you don't. It's great. Disney's registration system keeps track of that for you. So there's not anything special you have to indicate or do. When you're getting ready to go for your Run Disney trip, you'll get your check-in pass, your expo pass. It will be emailed to you. And when it's time for you to run your second qualifying race, your check-in pass will indicate that you are coast to coast eligible.
Okay. Okay. So it's done for you. You just need to wait for that check-in pass to come, which we know comes a couple of days before the race day. I hear people talk about like a wristband. Is that something you get at the expo when you're like picking up your bib?
Yes. So if you know that you are coast to coast eligible, you'll want to make sure that it is on your expo pass. There have been reports from people saying, hey, mine's missing. And they can take care of that at Runner Relations for you. But as long as that's listed, they're going to give you a wristband. And my wristband, this is from 2016. They let us keep them. They cut them, but they let us keep them. This past year, they said no. They collected them. But they give you a wristband so that it's indicated that you are a coast to coast runner.
Okay. And so after the races, you normally we are just handed our medal. Is that
Correct.
the
Yeah.
case? Like somebody looks and sees your wristband and goes and gets you a medal, or do you have to do anything special there?
So the finishing shoot at Disney, there's a lot of stuff happening. You've just run 10 miles at least, or a half marathon, depending. So you're going to go through, you're going to get your water bottle, you're going to get your awesome snack box,
The
and then
coveted snack box
the
with
snack
with some
box.
cheese.
There's still cheese in there. Um, you'll get your medal, and then you're going to be diverted one of two ways. You're going to go either to get your snack box and your banana and out into the reunion lot, or they're going to direct you toward the challenge medals, which would include the coast to coast medals.
Oh, okay. So it would be kind of the same process as somebody who have done a typical challenge, fairy tale challenge or goofy or dopey.
Yes.
I
So
see. Okay.
you'll get your medal at the finish. You want to make sure that you get that medal before you leave the finishing chute, though, because kind of then you'd have to deal with it later, potentially through runner relations or customer service.
Okay. Yeah. So you definitely want to get it before you leave that shoot because I mean
Yeah,
they're busy with runner relations and
they
all
are.
things Run Disney. So you don't want to have to track somebody down after the fact.
Yes.
It's interesting that they cut your wristband off this year though. Did they say why?
So in the past, the first time we did this in 2016 at the expo, they actually took your photograph. And then when you got your medal, they compared your photo to the person standing in front of them. And they also verified your times to make sure that you had completed all the races. Um, so, because they had the computer system there, I'm sure that they were probably marking them and keeping track that way. They're not doing that anymore. It's just strictly wristband. So, they cut it off so that there's some sort of accountability so that you can't go and get another medal.
Oh, okay. Somebody can't, go back around and say,
Yeah,
"Oh, I forgot to pick up my medal after the fact, and here's my wrist." I see. Okay,
yeah,
yeah, that makes more sense. And if you don't finish the race, since it's kind of like the challenges, I'm assuming if you were to DNF the half at your second race, you don't get the coast to coast. Am I right?
correct. Yes. So unfortunately, things happen, and if there were a reason where you weren't able to complete the race or not able to start the race, you do forfeit your medal, your coast to coast medal.
Okay. And if, let's say, that happened in a scenario with the marathon weekend and Disneyland um, half marathon weekend that happens in end of January slash February, because
Yeah,
it's now on that cusp of that weekend.
right.
If you DNF'd the half marathon at Disneyland, but then you were able to complete the Halloween half marathon, would you be eligible at that point since you technically became ineligible for the other one? Do you know that?
I believe so. I don't know if you'd have to confirm with Run Disney or anything, but technically you completed both within the calendar year. So I would think that they would honor that. I just
Okay.
don't know if it would be something where you would need to talk to runner relations about getting that signified, or if it's smart enough IT wise to track that for you.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those when in doubt, just
Yeah,
everybody at Run
just
Disney is so
ask.
nice. Just go ask
Yeah,
at runner relations, especially at the expo because they're there, they're set up. You can talk to
yeah.
them. I think those were all of the main questions that I had, other runners have had. What else can you tell us or want to share about Run Disney or Coast to Coast?
I mean, coast to coast is really straightforward and it's so much fun. Um, I think one of the really neat aspects of getting to run through both parks is seeing how each one does things. Where Disney World, there's so much entertainment. There are characters out on the course. You're experiencing bands. You're experiencing all the sights and sounds of Disney that you're accustomed to. Where Disneyland, they kind of let the park steal the show there. So you might not get to experience as many character interactions or entertainment venues on the course, but you have so much more park time and it's just beautiful getting to run through there. Um, so just the differences in culture between the two are really fun. I enjoy running through the city of Anaheim um, for the half marathon at Disneyland. I just, it's not for everyone. Not everybody likes it. I thought it was a neat way to break it up. Like you run through the parks, you run through the city, and then you're heading back to Disney to finish the race.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think people don't like running through Anaheim?
Um, when you're running at Disney World, even those tough highway miles, you're going to see a character every mile or two. And because you're running through the city of Anaheim, they can't take that Disney property out into the city. So you're not getting those kind of interactions and meet and greets out in the city. And I think sometimes people compare the two, expecting them to be the same, and they're just not. They're going to be different experiences.
Yeah, I mean they're technically different entities, just like Run
Yeah.
Disney is technically a different entity from Disney. And I think a lot of people forget that in Florida for Walt Disney World, those highways are Disney property. And so
Yes.
I mean, I don't think, now somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you actually leave any Disney property when you're running them in Florida, where you definitely are in Anaheim. Like you said, you're going through Anaheim City. That's no longer Disney property. So they can't take those characters because it's not their private land anymore.
And that's not to say that there aren't entertaining things to see out in Anaheim. Various groups will come and set up. The schools will be out with their bands, cheerleaders. The year we did it last year, there was a big car show set up in one of the parking lots that we had to run through. So there are organizations who come out to support the race. It's just not going to be the characters that you're accustomed to with the Walt Disney World races.
Right. The car show, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's always great when people take time out of their day to come and support you. And I think that that's just a whole different feeling than, the races in Florida. Like, yes, there are still going to be those bands and organizations coming in to help support the race, but I think that Anaheim, the Disneyland race, has a combination of that Disney feel, but also a road race that you might experience in any city.
That's what I was thinking, comparing it more to
Yeah,
another non-Disney related road race where yes, the local high school cheerleaders are there and the local high school band are there, but not necessarily seeing the different princesses or princes and
yeah.
Pixar characters, things like that. Yeah. Well, that's very good. That is a lot of information. I didn't realize like how far back Coast to Coast went and that it's actually not a new thing. It is coming back around. And so
Yes.
hopefully it's here to stay.
Yeah, I hope so. I really like what they're doing, refreshing the medals year after year. I hope that continues. I know there was disappointment initially from some uh, old school Run Disney runners who wanted to see the return of the classic partner statue medal. But I think that they did a nice job capturing the feeling of that in the 2025 medal. So
Yeah.
hopefully a lot of listeners here can go and earn that for themselves.
Yeah, that will be really cool. So what all races are you doing this upcoming year?
So I'm actually only signed up for Princess right now. I don't have any other Run Disney events planned. I think I'm gonna shift a little and work on some local races.
Very cool. Princess is a big one. I hear it's a lot
It
of fun.
is.
I've been a spectator at it. I haven't run it yet, but Princess is a weekend vibe all on its own. So that should be really cool.
It is.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for being here. If somebody wants to follow your Run Disney journey, where could they connect with you?
I'm on Instagram and my handle is Steph Runs Disney. It's all one word. And I post pretty much daily. I'm on Instagram as an accountability thing for myself. I just started posting my runs to keep track of them and kind of stack that habit. So I enjoy connecting with everyone who I might see at the race weekends. I've made a lot of friends that way.
That is such a Run Disney common thing. Everybody in the community I found is just so nice and welcoming, and everybody's following everybody else on the social channels, whether it be Facebook or Instagram. I'm partial to Instagram, so that's the one I think of first. So it's really cool to be able to see, like, I follow you, so I see your
Yeah.
journey. I love seeing your posts, like, oh, I have hit this milestone of this part of my running journey right now. It's really cool to see.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much again for being here.
Sure. Thanks.
Hey, can I ask a quick favor? If you're enjoying this podcast, would you take 20 seconds to leave a rating and review? Leaving a rating and a review helps other runners find this podcast because the platform you're listening to this on will start suggesting it to runners like you. All it takes is 20 seconds. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. As always, thanks so much for listening. That's all for now. Talk to you soon.